So, look, man, I know we got a late start, and I know you and I can go a little bit later, so that's cool. We'll spend another 10 minutes. So, what we'll do today is we're just going to talk about being AE of the year, right? And I want to start there, and then I've got some questions, and we'll get some more questions from the audience. So, Caleb, if you can kind of man the comments here, get people commenting. I know we've got 8 folks. Thank you, 8 of you. We had 60-something people in the first one, and then like 30, and I think I don't know. People are probably just hanging out in a dark room right now. And maybe what you want to do, Caleb, too, do me a favor, just copy and paste this post into the comments of the other ones.
Okay.
So if people were there, they can go check it out.
Awesome.
So first question I have for you is how did you get selected the AE of the year? Like how does that even work? Like how do they decide that you officially are the AE of the year?
It's a very tough thing to award. A more accurate description would have been the deal of the year, but obviously AE of the year is more catchy. So it was open forum. Anybody could apply, right? So there's a couple hundred people that applied. You had to go through this whole process to answer a bunch of questions that they had vetted out. And I had called them prior because I knew a few of the folks over there, and they hired like this big law firm that made everything very, very numbers driven in terms of scoring. So everybody went to go apply, and then they chose like a top 10. They announced those top 10. And then all of us, I believe, were at Dreamforce, which is where they hosted the party for this in downtown San Francisco. So I was selected as top 10 that way. And then in order to win, you had to go through the judges and the panel and the whole scoring thing there. And then they selected me to win at the end of it.
That's interesting. But was it based on like your numbers for the whole year, or is it based on like a deal?
It was based on a deal.
Oh. One deal?
One deal.
Wow. Interesting. One deal.
So more of the deal of the year than the AE of the year, but it's very imagine the complications of that. Like how if you're going to do like your numbers for the year,
100%.
Now you're getting into quotas and commissions and structure and territories. It's like,
but don't you have to call it AE of the year though? You know, like if you're going to call it, like that, I would think that that's what happened, is that you'd have like, that there were these 6 deals. But no, I get it. Trust me, it's probably a lot easier. And then to have people like vote on it too, that makes life a lot easier.
Yeah, I'm on the judging panel next year, so maybe I'll talk to you. I'll give them some of your feedback.
Don't bother. No, I just think it's interesting, like these types of things where, or it's like I see like there's some like award shows, and it's like, yeah, you're right. Quotas matter. Like all that stuff like really matters, if like you're going to like do it up. So what do you think, like with this deal in particular, like what stood out? Like what do you think when you thought this deal was special, or other people, like what was the feedback about this deal? Like take me through it. Like what do you feel like really like hit home for people? What resonated?
So what I posted was there's a couple hundred people that applied with all of their deals. I'm not an enterprise seller, right? So my deal size wasn't like in the upper 100K millions or whatever.
Yeah.
Whereas I knew I would compete against people that were going to do that would have $1 million deals that were enterprise sellers. So when I thought about applying, I read through the description, and the way that they scored it was 2 things. One is how helpful were you to the buyer at that deal? Okay. And the other was teamwork. How did you pull in people from either their organization or your organization to get the deal done?
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, this sets up a pretty good framework for a story of how you can tell a story of all the people you worked with, of individual steps throughout the process where you were helpful to them.
Yeah.
So I had one deal where I sold them our biggest package, two packages a year ago. And then they also ended up being a partner of ours. And then we also ended up buying their technology at a later time. And all 3 of those were really successful. And they drove a lot of pipeline and a lot of money, both for our marketing team, our joint partnership efforts, as well as what I sold them worked for them as well. And we had all of that sort of documented either through like case studies or through quote reviews, right? So I took all of that, I put it into a big story and walked through the entire process of how that happened. And then I hired my buddy to custom design it into like a storyboard, and then had him walk through everything. And then I submitted that as my application.
Yeah. Well, what did you do though differently? You know what I mean? So if I'm a seller, I'm one of the 20 people on the line now. Thank you everyone again for staying tuned. Again, Couple of rules here. One, if you like something that Danny says, please hit the like button or the clap button. I like the heart button. It makes me feel good. As you know, I've said it 800 times. So do that. And please drop your questions in the comments. So we're going to go deep for the next 25 minutes on kind of sales best practices. So what I want to know, we'll put the AE the year, what did you do differently in this deal, right? So if I'm a seller, right, or I'm training a sales team, what did you do differently? Around this deal that maybe other AEs aren't doing or you did an exceptional job of here?
I thought big picture. So when they first came to us, they had a little. So I got transferred the op from another rep from the year before where they said no, they didn't buy from us. Then I got the account. I went through and I got introductions into them. And if anybody here knows about G2, you know that we're a data provider. We provide intent signals about who's shopping. The company that Metadata is, the company that I sold, is an ABM platform. So think of Terminus demand base. So obviously natural synergies there. Now, when they came to us, they wanted to do this special agreement where they buy all of our data and do a big strategic partnership, but we said no to that, and then they didn't buy as a result. So when the conversation restarted, it was resetting expectations. What's that?
I said, yeah, right. Makes sense.
It was resetting expectations with them of what the value of working with us was for them. And it was it was reestablishing kind of what, first, why did they say no? We had to understand that. And they said it was the bigger picture. They wanted something bigger with us. So it was almost like a spiteful no. So it was overcoming that and really first reestablishing the value of here's what I have for you and how it benefits you. Here's where we're at in terms of partnering as a company together. And that requires me to go talk to our head of partnerships, go talk to our CEO, go get familiar with all the past conversations, put this all into context for them in terms of where we're at with each of these steps. And then we had to essentially start the sales process over and kind of run them through what is helpful from us that you can take and that would be helpful to you to build more pipeline and get more reviews, all these things. And then here's where we're at in terms of partnership. Here are the next steps. Here's what I'm going to help with. And then running them through that whole thing. And then later on, it was helping them get connected to our marketing team to start helping us. So a lot of patience, a lot of resetting expectations, and still making sure that you're staying true to what you can bring to them in terms of value.
I love that. So it sounds like one of the things was being very clear up front. And I think sometimes AEs struggle with that. They struggle to have those difficult conversations up front because they think it might hurt the relationship. And so I think it's a really good call out here of just, being able to set those clear expectations to where, it's going to be a win-win situation and they're thinking in the right mindset for you. So I think that's awesome. So we did get some questions, man. Awesome. And again, please drop your questions here. All 21 of you, thank you again for kind of sticking with it. Please drop questions in here, and I've got some from a post from before that I did yesterday. So Matt Beecham, and maybe Caleb, you can tag Matt too, just so he can know that we talked about this. How would a salesman not only survive a recession, but ways to thrive? And I'll give my 2 cents to which industries will likely be in demand during the next recession. What do you feel like an AE can do right now to thrive? And again, maybe your take on what segments, because obviously at G2 you sell to a lot of different types of software, tons, and service companies. So first off, what can you do to thrive in a more difficult, we'll call it financial landscape?
That's tough, right? I think the first thing is you'll have to ask yourself, is the company you're working at a need to have or a nice to have? Because in a recession, all the nice to haves are gone. Yeah. There's no budget for those anymore. But the secondary thing is just be reliable at the current company that you're at. Don't be part of the layoffs. The company's not going to lay off all of its salespeople during a recession. That's when they need them the most. So if you establish yourself early on as a performer, as somebody that's going to consistently hit quota, and you do your job, you're pretty safe in terms of avoiding a layoff. But I don't think there's really a great answer to that because companies in general are going to struggle. So consistency and really making sure that you're part of a company where you believe in their vision and their product, and it's going to help people.
Yeah, I think that's right. And Yeah, there's a lot of products. I mean, it's tough when you're living in a certain space to know like what's need to have or nice to have. And I don't think there's a single software that would ever they consider themselves nice to have. They think that they're critical,
right.
Or they're not. So I mean, like, look, I have the luxury of having went through the last recession, and I worked at a job site, right? I worked at Career Builder from 2007 to 2010. Then I went to Glassdoor from 2010 to 2012. So I was in the job space when people weren't hiring. And my team was the number one team to quota 2 years in a row out of 25 teams. People are still hiring, right? And I think what separated us and the team is we sold to business impact. And if you are good at understanding needs, people still have needs, and you're able to understand what's the impact of no action or what's the impact of this partnership to where then people can justify the investment, then they still make investments. And so I think you kind of couple what I like what you said there about the like need to have, nice to have, and then it's just about selling value. Again, it's like, does this solve a problem? Can I quantify the impact? And that's why we were successful. Is that we weren't talking about hiring. We were talking about, hey, in this economy, what are your business goals? And how can we at Career Builder than Glassdoor be the catalyst to get you there? So that's my advice to Matt, Mr. Beecham, do that, right? And just honestly, it's the best time to sell. It really
is.
It's I loved it.
The market's hot too. If you want to make like a switch, there's just ridiculous jobs at the moment. Everything's like we're living in a really good time to be a seller and to make a lot of money. So it's not going to be here forever though.
That's exactly right. So, and that's it. And if you develop a sales process where it's built, I think in retrospect, I was probably very lucky that that's where I started my career, right? In retrospect, I mean, I was in my third year of like being a professional, like outside of college in 2000, like maybe like fourth or fifth year. And I think it made me a better seller, right? Like when you have to learn how to sell on value, then when times are flush, you destroy everybody. Because not only do people have deeper wallets, you can create even a better business case and the cash is flowing. So I think there's usually always an opportunity to really thrive and like continue to grow skills. So we got another one here from Michael Olivieri. Danny, this one's for you. It says, I'm a big believer in doing the right things consistently will lead to success. I'd appreciate sharing the 3 things you do on a daily basis that lead to your success in sales. So you've got to boil it down to the top 3 things that you do to be successful. What are the three? It's like almost like if you're on a deserted island, right? Like they're like, well, what would you bring on your deserted island? So what would you bring on your deserted island of AE greatness?
That's a tough one. 3 things.
3 things. Deserted island of AE greatness.
Number 1 thing is empathy for your customers. So understanding when you go into conversations with them, knowing that it's about them and understanding that you are there to service them. You are there to bring something that makes their life easier. So when you go into calls, having that frame of mind is the most important. That way, when you ask questions like how are they measured, what business impacts do you have, you are genuinely curious and you genuinely want to help that person. I'd say that's the number 1 thing between somebody that just wants to sell something and get a commission and somebody that truly wants to help another individual on the other end of the line.
Can we before you move on to the next one? Can we go deeper on this? I think everyone thinks they do what you just said. I don't think I've ever met a seller. Ever met a seller that was like, I'm not consultative. I like jam things down people's throat, or I'm not. I know that empathy is not my strength. Now I know how to deal with that because it's not my strength, right? By being consultative and really genuinely caring about like their business. But how do you differentiate that skill? Like what? Maybe a better question. Like what does good look like? You know what I'm saying? Like. Everyone says that they are empathetic or that they ask questions, but like when you see good, whether it's you or others, what do you do typically there?
Well, the way you recognize it is, does that turn into a referral for you later? Or does that person turn into somebody that's going to be in your network later?
I like
or,
that.
Shout out to Sahil, will they leave you a bravado review? Like, how well did you actually do with them? And that will be the telltale sign of if you were truly helpful to them. But that's all up here, right? Like, you can't, everybody's going to say that, everybody's going to say the right thing, but it's very obvious to somebody that you're trying to sell if you are out for their best intentions or not. Right. And people can sense that in your voice and the way that you communicate with them. So they'll know. But then the outcome is what they do for you after you sell them beyond just, your product working well for them.
I like that, man. I like that a lot. Okay, so that's one. So you track it, like helpfulness, empathetic, you track it by, what's the strength of that relationship afterwards, right? Or is there one, So, okay, all right, what are the next two things? So to be a top AE, what are the other two things?
Curiosity. So you need to have a thirst for knowledge, both for an expert on your own company and your own product for what it can do, an expert on how it's helping current customers you have in other spaces so you can bring those stories in to tell them. And a thirst for, I think Clay, before the LinkedIn Live started, put in a question about like, what books did you read? I'm actually not I need to do better at this, but I'm not a fan of reading many sales books. Like, I've read Challenger Sale, I've read Transparency Sale, I've read all these things, and they've helped contextualize sales for me and give me a history of sales. But to be honest, where I've learned most of my craft is through people like you, people like JB, people that are putting out free content for how they're selling and what's working and real examples of what's going on. So you need to have that curiosity and that thirst for knowledge to gain an understanding of how you can level up your game and how you can make the most of everything that you have. Because in my opinion, sales is really just fast critical thinking and fast problem solving on the fly. Like, you have a conversation, you have all this knowledge. How do you compact that knowledge into one or two nuggets that is going to help the customer? But in order to get to that point, you first need to know everything in the first place. So having that thirst and that genuine curiosity to go learn as much as you possibly can to be helpful to people would be my second one.
All right, so curiosity, I can get down with that one. I'm trying to think. No, I read a lot of books, and for me, it was a lot of the psychology. Like, I read, if you read Zig Ziglar and the older school salespeople, like Brian Tracy, there's a whole bunch. And what they helped me with was, how do you phrase a question? Why does how you phrase a question matter? What's the impact of positioning something this way versus this way? So for me, there's a lot of psychology in sales, and the way that you ask a question has a direct correlation to the answer that you get. And so
100%.
What I learned from a lot of these is that. So
I think when you're choosing books to read, a lot of concepts will die with time. And so when you choose books to read, try to find things that can, be true decade over decade. Like psychology, for example, the way humans think and function, that's not going anywhere. Whereas, 10 techniques for how sales worked in 2006 is garbage right now. It's not going to work.
There's going to be, there'll be tenets that you can borrow from, right? You're like, okay, the modern version of that is X or Y. For sure. And then, so what's the third one? What's your third one? So we've got curiosity. By the way, I'm not a big. So for everyone out there, I'm not a big fan of the word curiosity, and the reason is it's very ambiguous. Curiosity means something different to you than it does to me. But what I hear you getting at though is that there is a desire to continue growth mindset, and coupled with being curious about your being interested in your clients, right? I'm showing interest in their business. I am interested in my product and learning more about it. And then what's 3 for you? So what's the other one for you?
I mean, it's the one everybody says, but it's just unrelenting work ethic.
Okay, tell me more. What does unrelenting work ethic mean to you?
You don't let anybody else beat you if you want something. And it drives you crazy if they are beating you at that, right? Everybody can say they work hard, but the numbers in this case really do show that. We're all in sales. We have the most your number is your output. So it's the most measurable out of any role out there. So it's very easy for you to say at the end of the year, this is a reflection of all the work that I put in is this number. And so I would say the competitiveness of beating somebody else and having the work ethic to drive you further, or maybe it's not, against your peers, but it's a certain goal that you're trying to reach, and you are going to reach that goal, and you're going to figure out a way to reach that goal. That mindset of having that.
Yeah, I guess drive, would that be?
Sure.
Yeah, the way to do it. Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I'm trying to think, how important is drive? Have I ever met No, the only time I've ever met less driven salespeople is when they're early at a company and it's just product market fit. You know what I mean? It's just this beautiful thing that comes together, and they've got this amazing amount of product market fit. But I like those three. I think that's right. Yeah, if you're continuing to grow, you have a growth mindset, you actually genuinely are interested in helping your clients, and you're driven to kind of keep persevering, whether it's from rejection, whether it's from deal stalling or taking longer than you'd like, and then again putting in that extra effort. I think those are all really strong, man. I think those are
very tough to boil sales down to three things, but I think those three are decent.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that the thing I would add, I don't know if I would displace any of those though. It might just be a 4. Is I'm a big fan of a structured discovery process, meaning what I see consistently is reps that are successful ask the same questions over and over again, and they really genuinely try to care and invest on how people make money, and really want to understand their business. I've never had a problem with scripts ever. I understand why certain people do, but I really feel like having a good structured discovery, I think it's impossible to be great at sales without it, because you won't get the information you need ever. You miss stuff, and I think that's a big mistake I see a lot of people make, is that they wing it on every conversation consistently. So
I sell to marketers, and the one question I will always ask them on every single call is, how are you measured? What are your goals? Specific, is it, it always comes back to leads and
Sure.
How marketing contributes to revenue, but it's okay, is it pipeline? Is it MQL source? Is it the volume of those? Is it the quality of those? Specifically, what do you have to report to every month or every quarter?
Yeah.
Now, once I have that, we can figure out how to reverse engineer that and figure out where to get you.
Yeah.
Right?
I love that. Yeah, because if not, again, you're just guessing. And what I see when people don't write their questions down is consistently they miss questions, right? They're like, oh, I forgot to ask this time. How long have you been in sales?
4 years.
4 years. All right. So that's not a ton of time. So you've kind of grown up with a lot of sales tech then, because that stuff was new-ish back in 2015. So what's the biggest thing that's changed for you? If you look about, you selling in the very beginning, first sales job, to where you're at now, what do you think is the biggest trend you've seen over the last 4 years?
Biggest trend.
Or truth that was true then and maybe is less true now?
That's a tough one. I'd be curious on your thoughts while I stew over it a little bit.
In the last 4 years, it's sales engagement technology. I don't think there's it's outreach and SalesLoft. I feel like there's no tools, no two set of tools that have disrupted a space that those two have. That if you're not super proficient and I think as an account executive, you should be using those tools. I think as a customer success team, you should be using those tools. The efficiency gain when used properly is insane. The ability to put people into 50 different personal sequences and manage the volume of pipeline that you can manage now is completely different than it was before, just because of those tools. So that would be the very first one I'd call out, because we had data, right? We had ZoomInfo and data.com. We've had Zoom or something like it for a long time. We've had Salesforce for a long time, and there's some different things here or there, but there's that again, where I think things are going to get weird is with G2, right? And I think G2 is going to disrupt the way that sellers have to sell, because the buyer's going to have access to so much information that if you as a seller don't get up to speed on your competition and how you're portrayed in the market publicly, you're going to start to get smoked when people come inbound. And so that would be my like 2020, 2021, kind of thing I think is going to change.
Yeah.
But I think sales technology is what I would probably highlight. I
agree with that. And I think the other one to really couple with this, and I think this is one I've taken advantage of pretty well, is everything is the medium is shifted to online. So you have a lot of podcasts, you have a lot of content being produced on social, you have a lot of people that are literally giving you their job description in their LinkedIn. And all of this is public to you before you get on a call with them.
Yeah.
So one thing I'll do on most of my calls is I will go through their LinkedIn, I will go to their website, I will look at their content, I will look at their job postings, I'll look at all these things, and then I'll share that with them as we start the call. Like, hey, I did all this prep, and I'll condense it into like 2-3 minutes. Like, this is what it seems like you're at right now. This is your description of what you're going for. So my assumption is you're trying to do this. And then I let them tell me yes or no. But I've earned their trust at that point that I've already put time into them. I've already invested in them. So that way, when I ask them a question like, how are you measured or what do you want? It comes with a bit more credibility that they'll actually answer it because they're thinking about you're trying to help them.
Yeah, you actually prepped for the meeting and showed that like, hey, I showed up prepared. Like, wow. Novel,
and you have so many
idea.
Resources now that's online that you can pull from. So I think that's been a big one for me.
Yeah, no, I think that's it too. I think people know when you show up prepared or don't, or 100% for sure. All right, so let's do a couple more questions here. Thank you again, everyone, for tuning in. I really appreciate you sticking with it. We're gonna go a little long here because of it. A couple more here. So. Again, I know you've had a few promotions at G2, and so maybe you can speak to like how you've been able to move up in your career. If you think about what are the things that you think you do that other people might not do as well or just don't do that's stopping them from moving up as quickly as you have.
Well, I think honestly the first one is giving a shit, and you can't teach that. Like I legitimately know that I care about my career more than the majority of my peers. So that's number one, right? I have that in me where I will do things that I know differentiates myself from my peers, and I can get those promotions. But from, say you're on an even playing field with your peers and you care the same amount, like what can you do? I would say, I wrote an article on this for Sales Hacker, and I got your quote on it, Jake, a while ago. This was specifically for sales management. But I think like one of the biggest things you need to understand is who your boss is. Your boss is going to be the person to champion you into whatever role that might be, whether it's their role and you take it over when they move up, or it's cross-functionally. So make sure you know your boss well. And frankly, if you are a boss, this is a question you should be asking any one of your employees is where they want to go. And then hopefully throughout the year, you're both making mutual objectives of, okay, if you want to switch, this is things you should do. If you want to move up, here's what you need to do. And you can define those. That's really number one. Number two is consistency and reliability. If you can do your job and hit your metrics, you have to do that if you want to move up anywhere.
That's right.
And then once you can nail down a pattern for how that works, then you can start to seek out to solve problems either for your boss or for the company. So if you know your boss is struggling with pipeline and you're doing well in pipeline, start to teach the team your tricks on pipeline so their life becomes easier. You can do those things better. You're helping out people that are within your team, you're helping them, and you're helping the boss. Like that makes you a shoo-in for a manager role here in the future. Yeah. So know what the role is that you want, know the skills that it takes to do that, and start to practice those skills after you've already done the work to do your job effectively.
That's right. Yeah, you're already starting to do the job that you want, right? Or where you want to go. And I think it's the same thing if you wanted to go into enterprise, right? It's starting to take on slightly larger deals or having multiple conversations that are outside of maybe the core use case. So I think that's great, dude. Yeah, I think.
And if you want to do like enterprise, an example, like you can't go sell enterprise accounts, but what you can do is go approach your top enterprise rep, ask him to sit on calls. Don't just ask him for something without return. Like if you sit on calls, say you'll take his notes for him or her or whatever it might be, offer some sort of mutual exchange and start to figure that out in your spare time.
I love that. Yeah, that's a great call out. Yeah, I mean, look, I think you literally have hit on all of it, right? You've got to manage up. A lot of what you're talking about is managing up. And I think a lot of people don't do a very good job of that. They think, and you mentioned this too, that if you just sell, like selling, it's like selling is the prerequisite, right? Like your points of consistent, right? You got to be consistent. Because again, as if I'm a director and I'm hiring my next manager and that's you, I want someone who's reliable, not just who has a blip here or there. Because again, your reps know what your tenure was there. And so if you're not, doing the right activities every day, hitting things consistently, you're not gonna, I'm not gonna want to promote you because I need you to be leading by example before you take the job. So, all right, man. So I got maybe one more question here, or I don't know if you've got some questions, man. I'm happy to answer any questions you have too. But mine is that, let's talk about setting meetings. There's been a lot of talk on LinkedIn about the sales development role and like what happens, with that role. Colin Cadmus has been posting some stuff on it. We had some back and forth over the last week or two about it. What are your tips for like generating meetings? What do you feel like you do differently? I'll share my kind of tips too, but what do you feel like you do differently to stand out when you're setting meetings?
So I've talked about this a bit with a lot of peers at G2 and outside of our company, and I've come to realize that I'm pretty spoiled in terms of where I work. Because if you think about G2, you have a profile that's already live and things are already happening. So when I reach out, it's already personalized. Other people don't have that luxury.
That's right. Clay stole that from us at Glassdoor. Clay stole it from Glassdoor.
So for prospecting for me at G2, it goes back to prepping for calls. There's so much available information already out there on that individual that if you're not taking the time to personalize it and show the person that you wrote it, you're just blending in with the rest of people that are reaching out with some of these cadences. And cadences don't have to be bad. You can personalize them. You can do a good job with them. But the majority of people that use them, 90% just spam. And they just get a value prop. But if it happens to be the right time, then they do that. But what I've found is if you take the time to craft a really good email with good value props, even if they don't reply to it in April, they might reply to it in October. If people reply to my emails from 8 months ago, it's hey, it's a better time. Can we now connect? This was really interesting, whatever it might be. So I hate always using the term value because it's different to everybody, but that's what it is.
How do you define it? What is the piece, if you look at your emails or your talk track, what is the piece of value or one or two of the pieces that you think are most key to resonating with people?
What is the value prop when I reach out to somebody to
get what are the elements of it? What are the elements that go into it? You're reaching out to people. I'll tell you mine. I'll tell you the things that I've just found over and over again. One is relevant job title knowledge. Hey, look, I work with other VPs of operations. I know in 2020, these are probably one of your top 2 or 3 initiatives. Boom, 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 right? The other is relevant competition, right? I find micro companies that look like you in your sub-industry. You're in consumer packaged goods. I've worked with, Procter and Gamble. It's I make Keurigs. You don't know my world. And then the third one is location. I work with other VPs of operations in Seattle in this space, and I can help you. So if you can get those 3 things, location specific, micro sub industry, and the job, every time.
100%. And that all comes with the, requisite of knowing what that person's job is and being able to provide something that they don't know that can help them. That's the term of value, right? How can you help somebody do something that they couldn't before without you? Yeah. Or how can you touch on something that they know they need to work on and you have some sort of expertise in that? That's hitting at the crux. Yeah,
I love that, man. All right, my man. So look, we had some technical difficulties. We made it work, right? We made it work. I'm glad we were able to do it. So for anyone who's tuning in, again, make sure to tag your coworkers. Danny dropped a lot of knowledge here talking about, what it takes to be a successful AE, career path, etc. And I love that the good part I think about the things you hit on, Danny, is they're all very actionable. That I think a lot of times we like to think there's so many things that are outside of our control, but if you literally just kind of pause a lot of this, you're going to get some really good insights and things and tactics that you can take away and implement almost immediately. So I appreciate it, man. I appreciate you being patient, sticking 15 minutes longer. I know you got a call to run to. Caleb and I got some filming to do. So thanks again, everyone. Tune in this Friday. We're doing another LinkedIn Live for the weekly recap. So we'll continue with that format, doing a live recap. We might have some interviews we're going to mix in. I don't know. And then again, every Monday, 12 Eastern, LinkedIn Live with an amazing salesperson or sales leader like my man Danny here. And thanks again, everyone, for tuning in. Have a great rest of your week.
See you guys. Bye.